מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בנאות שירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני, נפשי שובב ישובב, ינחני במגלי צדק, ינחני במגלי צדק, למען שמו, גם כי כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת לשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב החסד ירדפוני, כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
As Cantor Rosenbaum began our service today with the words of the Psalm, our traditional words, Psalm 23, I'll ask you to join me in "The Lord is my shepherd." The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Today we mourn the loss and honor the legacy of Dr. Alan Riga, beloved father of Susan and Brian, Lori and Jeff and Jill, beloved grandfather of Jacob and Olivia, Adam, Sarah, Emma and Dylan, Andy and Allison. Even toward the end, after the debilitating stroke that physically limited him in so many ways, Alan loved coming to Shoal with Judy. And one day he even came to Minyan, our morning service, just to prove to himself that he still could. It was such a triumphant display of mind over matter for someone who had a particularly brilliant mind and spent his life studying matter. I'm so grateful to have gotten to know him, to recall his radiant smile and the way he'd greet you by kissing your hand. Alan was an intellectual giant who, in his final chapter, was trapped in a body that struggled to communicate the words he wanted to say. One thing about Shoal is that the words are here for us when we struggle to communicate the depths of our grief, our gratitude, and our love, as we turn to our ancient tradition for wisdom and comfort. A time is set for everything. A season and a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. We have special tributes from the family, from Alan's 3 daughters, Susan and Lori and Jill, and we'll turn it over now to you guys.
Getting my phone revved up quickly. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who's come to support us here. It's just amazing to think about and remember and see all of you here. You have been part of my parents' lives when I was young, and people who have been part of our families, Lori, Jill, and I. And I want to really ensure that you know how grateful that we are for your presence, your friendship, and your love with my father. And I will be starting in 1 second. Looking around this room, I see so many people, and some of you walk through to meet and greet with us, that my father loved, worked alongside, and cared about. And that means more to my family than I can say, or we can say. In a real way, you are part of his community, and today you're part of ours too. My father was quite simply a good human being. That's a really important thing to say out loud, and especially these days. Not in the small, polite sense of the word, but in the fullest sense. He spent his life advocating for people who were unable to advocate for themselves. Many of you knew him in B'nai B'rith and the Cleveland Council for Soviet Anti-Semitism. He spent his life advocating for those people and serving those by teaching and sharing his knowledge. He believed deeply in this and didn't just believe in those things. For anyone who knew him, he really lived it. He gave his time, his energy, and his leadership to many service organizations, student groups, and universities. More often than not, he ended up leading them because people trusted him and wanted to follow where he pointed. He was also, before anything else, a father. To me and my sisters, he was the kind of dad who didn't just tolerate our interests, he championed them. Whatever path we chose, whatever career we pursued, he was in our corner, cheering loudly and unapologetically. That is something to say for a man who had 3 daughters and really, truly embodied that. That kind of support shapes you. It shaped all 3 of us, and I learned so much more about that in speaking to the rabbi the other night, truly how he supported us in different and individual ways. And then there was my mother. My dad knew after 2 dates that he wanted to marry her. They were blessed to have 64 years together, 64 years of an unbelievable love, the kind you don't see that much anymore. This is the part where I knew I might cry. Even at the end, she would still tell him every single day, I love you. At first, it was with words that he would say back, I love you. And then it turned into whispering when it became difficult for him to speak. And then even in the last week, she would whisper, I love you. He could barely move, and he would squeeze her hand. I love you. Right, Mom? That's what they had. And that's the love, that story that we all got to witness. That's the marriage that he built. He was also simple and had fun. He laughed a lot. He made other people laugh, sometimes a loud laugh. He had this warmth that put people at ease and made you feel like you mattered to him, because you did. I want to share one story because I think it says about him, about how he tried to connect to all kinds of people, whether it was the most brilliant scientist or my 1-year-old child. And that is my oldest son, Jacob. And Jacob would talk on the phone to my dad. I mean, we would be on the phone, no FaceTime, no video. And my dad was trying to relate to Jacob, and he would say, "How now, brown cow?" And Jacob learned over time to say, "How now, brown cow," back. And then they would communicate in that way. Well, many months went by before we came to Cleveland. We were living in Chicago at the time, and then my dad we ended up coming to Cleveland for Thanksgiving. So Jacob was maybe a year and a half. And we arrived at my parents' home, and we walked in, the three of us, my husband Brian and I and Jacob was very shy. And my dad was, standing across the room, and Jacob didn't know what to make of it. And all of a sudden, my dad looked at him and said, "How now, brown cow?" And all of a sudden, Jacob took a beeline over and knew who he was, because that was my dad. He could communicate at many, many different levels. That was beautiful, a skill, and I really appreciate it. Now, I'm going to tell you that I forgot my darn picture over there. Sarah has it. But in preschool then, Jacob had colored a picture of a cow, and the teacher wrote on it, "To Papa, how now, brown cow." And it was hanging up in his study until they moved to the house that they're in about 5 years ago in a frame, and we all remember that. So that is just so beautiful of how he connected. That was my dad. He showed up, he remembered. Lately in my life, I've been thinking about meaning, and he was a digger-inner. That's a word that I say when you just don't show up, but you really dig in and understand the problems and do the hard work, show up for people and really care about people and whether it's family or at work. That was who he is. And we're all better for having known him. Thank you, Dad. We love you, and we will miss you every day. Thank you again to our family and community who is here today. It truly means the world to us, and I look forward to hearing. I think my sister Lori is going to share some more fun stories, I think, too.
So thank you, Susan. Susan told you, many people might know, that my dad was a big activist in the community. He was also a great scientist, but I wanted to talk today a little bit more about the personal side of him. And for people who didn't know him, my dad was, in his day, the nutty professor, the absent-minded professor. My brother-in-law, Brian, called him the son of flubber. Like, if you have seen that movie, that is my dad. He was also chronically late to everything he went. My mom used to say to him, "Alan, you're going to be late to your own funeral." But for the grace of God and the kind people at the Berkowitz-Kumin funeral home, he is for the first time ever on time today. So we're excited about that feat. My dad was also a pioneer of the dad joke. So that meant, for example, when I called the house and said, "Hey, Dad, is Mom around?" he would inevitably reply, "No, she's short and thin." He would say, "I tried to tell a chemistry joke, but I couldn't get a reaction." Okay, see, the science people got that like a second sooner than everyone else. "Hey, you think the rain will hurt the rhubarb? Not if it's in cans." Yep, that was my dad. So he was sort of the nerdy sciencey kind of guy, but he was also the cool dad. So he graduated high school in 1955, just as the nascence, really, of the rock and roll scene, rock and roll music, and he really embraced the evolving or emerging leaders of that movement. Chuck Berry, he loved Chuck Berry. He loved Little Richard. He loved Elvis, and he could dance in the way that they did in the 1950s, and he danced with us that way at weddings and things, where you were actually, he would lead us and dip us, and you were actually dance partners. My dad also was in a fraternity when he was in college, which meant that as we became teenagers and we thought we could get away with things, we could not. We could get away with nothing because he had done it already before. So, for example, when my sister Susan put some pillows under a comforter thinking that my parents would believe she was asleep in her bed, my dad knew not to just look from the doorway, but to actually go over to the bed. And yes, he discovered that she had snuck out of the house. When I tried to sneak into the house at 3 a.m., quietly opening the door, tiptoeing in, there was my dad sitting in the dark in the living room, scaring the heck out of me when I realized he was there. So he definitely, we could not pull one over on him. He embraced being teenagers. He embraced the music of our time as well. And carrying on the theme of the cool dad, he took me and my friends to some rock concerts. My first concert was Bruce Springsteen, The River Tour, and he took me and my friend to that. He took me to Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. He got even more cool as my younger sister grew older. He took her and her friends to Blue Oyster Cult and Depeche Mode. He actually, I think there was a week in my house where my mom would not speak to my dad because of the price he paid for the Who tickets and the Who North American tour. But I think age started to catch up with them a little bit because, as Jill tells me, he took her and her friend to a Rush concert. And at some point during the concert, she and her friend looked over and Dad was asleep. So, and I was trying, if any of you know Rush, the band, I was trying to think what Rush song would have lulled him to sleep. And I could come up with nothing. So I'm going to attribute that to just Dad getting older. But Dad didn't only just enjoy listening to music. He also liked to sing. Really just camp songs, like nothing special. He liked to sing in the car when we were driving home from events. And one of my fondest, more recent memories of him is when after he had his first stroke about a decade ago, I went to go visit him in the rehab, and the aide came over and said, "Alan, it's time to go." And he got up and he was in his walker, and he was walking down the hall singing the 1927 song, "We ain't got a barrel of money, maybe we're ragged and funny, but we'll travel along singing our song side by side." And I know today, Dad, that we can no longer walk with you side by side. I know that that's not a possibility. But I know that in our hearts, what we can do is embrace the way that you lived your life. And that is with just such joy in his heart, a song in his heart, and joy in his life. And I know that if we live our lives that way, then that will be how we carry you with us, and you will live on in us. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So I'm just going to read a couple of poems. I'm the poet person of my family, so so I'll read. I just have a couple of poems that other people wrote, and then there's one that I wrote that I'm going to read. Okay, this first one is called "For Grief" by John O'Donohue. Okay. When the canvas frays in the crotch of thought, and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. Okay. This next one is called "Into the Freedom and Wind and Sunshine." Author unknown. Do not hold on to me with tears, for I am not gone, I am only changed. I am the wind that brushes your cheek, the warmth that lights your path. Okay. So that's those. And this is my, one second. All right, the title of this is just Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Okay. Matter converts to energy at a fixed rate. God wastes nothing, not a single electron, not one lonely neutrino. But the most poignant part of this poem, written in physics, is that everything moves through time at the speed of light. If you are a proton, one grain of pure light, time does not exist. Albert Einstein spelled out in numbers the truth of eternal light, where God inhabits, the dimension tucked out of sight of human eyes, the light that we come from and return to, droplets in the cosmic ocean. Daddy, you are among the stars now, direct witness to their beauty, confidant to their mysteries. Maybe you and Mr. Albert have already met by now, taken a tour of relativity, surfed the newly observed gravitational waves. Once, when we were vacationing as a family by the ocean, you carried me and Lori tenderly, one of us on each arm, over the prickly shells of snails we were too afraid to touch at the bottom of the water with our little feet. Always you tried to carry me above things that could hurt me, though sometimes I fought your protection, even as snail shells cut my feet and spilled my blood. I understand now that carrying, how it took strength that I could not see, how it hid pain that you were willing to feel in my place. I will carry you, Daddy, forever, in that place where the sun is shining, where the ocean wears away at everything sharp-edged, where the water joins at last the sky in a single brilliant blue.
Susan, Lori, and Jill, thank you for such loving, brilliant tributes to your father. One of my most prized possessions is a painting Alan painted for my then newborn daughter a couple years ago. Severely limited as he was, the figure he painted on the canvas is certainly a winged creature and can either be interpreted to be a bird or maybe an angel. There's a rabbinic story that when God decided to create human beings, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, the angels protested. The most precious of treasures to be created, B'Tselem Elohim, the angel said, and Master of the universe, you're going to entrust it to human beings? Frail, mortal, deeply flawed human beings? At least hide it. But where? One angel stepped forward. Hide it at the peak of the highest mountain. It will take them centuries to find it. Another angel stepped forward. Bury it in the deepest depths of the ocean. It will take them millennia to find it. Finally, a third angel stepped forward. No, hide it in the eyes of their fellow human beings. They'll never go searching for it there. The angels were almost right. Most of us have a hard time truly recognizing the presence of God in the eyes of our fellow man, or in the natural world all around us. Most of us look, but so few of us ever really see on a deeper molecular level. Because to really see takes curiosity, patience, an investment of time, energy, and emotion that we rarely feel we have to give. But what the angels got wrong was that there would be people like Dr. Alan Riga. Alan looked deeper than most of us believe ourselves capable of. Whether it was through the lens of a microscope, he was a brilliant and decorated chemist. Through the lens of a camera, he was a passionate photographer. Or through the lens of his own humanitarianism, he was president of B'nai B'rith and the Cleveland Council of Soviet Anti-Semitism, as you've heard, fighting courageously for imprisoned Jews, refuseniks in the former Soviet Union. Alan saw hidden truths of the universe, whether ethically and spiritually that we're all made in the image of God, or academically and intellectually as he holds 3 patents and penned 198 publications in the field of thermal analysis, which studies how a substance's physical and chemical properties change as a function of temperature and time. Alan was born in 1937 and, apart from a brief stint in Great Neck, New York, grew up here in Cleveland. His father passed away tragically when Alan was only 18 years old, and Alan responded by stepping up to take care of his mother. And he would continue to talk to his father even after he was gone. As you said, God doesn't waste even a proton. He attended college at Western Reserve, which was Case Western by the time he earned his PhD in chemistry, launching him into a long, successful career at Lubrizol, which specializes in oil and chemicals. Emma, you recall time in your grandfather's study, where the shelves were filled with books. He was a voracious reader, and the walls were lined with accolades. Allison, being younger at the time, you more vividly remember taking treats from his junk room or selecting a pin from his extensive collection. Andy, you recall time in your papa's lab at Case, where he took you when you were 7 or 8 and showed you how a copper strip turns blue when submerged in vinegar. You said that having him as a grandfather completely changed the trajectory of my life, as his encouragement and support, mentorship, and inspiration helped guide you down the road of earning a PhD in biochemistry yourself. And Jacob, you earned your PhD in chemistry and flew down to read your dissertation to your papa, who even in the state he was in, focused on you for 2 hours as you explained it. You even read him the dedication page where you wrote, "For Papa, without whom I wouldn't have become a scientist." Like a copper strip that turns blue when it comes into contact with vinegar, there's a chemical reaction that takes place between people too. We are forever changed by people we're lucky to know. That's a principle of thermal analysis we can all understand because we all knew Alan, and he's changed all our trajectories for the better. But here's the ultimate lesson in chemistry. Alan met Judy in 1962. You were at Mount Sinai at the time, yourself a highly accomplished registered nurse, and mutual friends kept trying to set you up. After calling multiple times, and after playing it very cool and taking your time, you finally agreed to a date. It was raining that night, and as he was picking you up for an evening of classical music at Severance Hall, he offered to pull the car up to the curb so that you wouldn't get wet. A chivalrous gesture which you declined, as you told him, "I'm not sugar, I won't melt." Together you have 3 incredible daughters. Susan, you shared that your parents had the most adorable marriage of 64 years. You said he encouraged her to go back to school and get her degree, which you did, Judy, after your kids were already in high school. Lori, you said that the only fight your parents ever had was over Alan's messiness, which Brian, you corroborated when you lovingly call him the son of flubber, as you've heard. Jill, you shared how he always encouraged and supported everyone's passions, including yours, for visual arts and poetry, which was on full display today. He was a dancer, a wrestler, someone who was constantly singing his fraternity songs with kids and grandkids. The house was filled with classical music and games of chess, and also somehow at one point, 9 dogs. Alan, whose love of learning also extended to eccentric hobbies, learned how to breed dogs, which he took to dog shows around the country with all his spare time. He even became a judge for the American Kennel Club, yet another example of his uniquely discerning eye. He collected dog pictures, dog tchotchkes, a fascination which, Susan, you described as being kind of on the mashug side. Full of genius, full of quirk, and full of love, this is the home you created. As Jeff, you shared, it was always obvious how much they loved their family and how much pride his family gave him. There's a saying in the Talmud that Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bezeh. All of Israel is responsible one for the other. This may help us understand Alan's heroic dedication to the plight of Soviet Jews. Susan, you remember being schlepped to Cleveland Heights as a kid regularly to spend time with Soviet Jewish families, with immigrant children, because your father wanted them to know they had a community here that cared about them, that all of Israel is responsible one for the other. And when you peer into the eyes of another human being and really see, you find the image of God, something the brutal Soviet regime certainly never searched for in the eyes of the Jews. Jill, you had an empty chair at your bat mitzvah in honor of the Soviet Jews forbidden from celebrating theirs. Alan not only worked tirelessly writing letters and getting congresspeople like Dennis Eckert involved, he visited the former Soviet Union multiple times. Judy, you shared a story of how you and Alan smuggled blue jeans for dissidents to sell on the black market and were very nearly caught by inspectors. How a member of the KGB once ripped out the film from Alan's camera and destroyed it. How he communicated to you secretly using magic markers because the room was bugged. And while Alan was never himself thrown in prison, he did visit a certain refusenik who never forgot their encounter. Such that years later, when Alan was in the audience at a talk he was giving, Natan Sharansky spotted him in the crowd and said, "You're Alan Riga," and remembered the exact date on which he had visited him in prison. Alan taught at Cleveland State, Toledo, and his alma mater Case into his 80s. Susan, you called him the quintessential teacher who helped his students, who helped his kids and grandkids find their strengths. He was beloved, respected, and admired by no one more so than Judy. You said, "I would not put him in a nursing home." You kept him comfortable at home, cared for by yourself, your daughters, and excellent caregivers from JFSA, and in particular Stephanie, for almost 2.5 years. And when JFSA would ask you, "Who's with him tonight?" you'd reply, "I am." Hineni, which is one of the central prayers we recite on the high holidays coming up in just a few short weeks. You have been the ultimate embodiment of Hineni, Hine Ani, here I am. Even amidst his decline, you'd always say, "Rabbi, he's such a sweet man, and I'm so lucky, and I love him." As the incredibly devoted wife, caregiver, and friend you were to him, you've taught us all another lesson in thermal analysis, that you're not sugar and you won't melt, that no amount of rain or misfortune could ever change the physical or chemical properties of your love for him. By the end, it was very difficult, if not impossible, to communicate verbally with Alan. But the genius of hiding B'Tselem Elohim in the eyes of another human being is that so much can be communicated non-verbally, as you've heard, through kisses on the hand, through loving glances, through tears. Lori, you shared that the last coherent thing he said to you in response to Emma's wedding to Dylan was, "You have a beautiful family." Andy, you shared your final interaction was talking about science. You wouldn't have imagined it any other way, explaining your most recent published paper, and how you noticed a twinkle in his eye and a smirk. And Judy, as you shared with us, his hand squeezing Judy's 3 times for "I love you." Whether that painting he gifted my daughter is of a bird or of an angel, I see a spirit no longer fettered by the limitations of a failing body. It's the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim, which lies hidden within all of us. It's the dignity he always upheld in others and the dignity you always upheld in him, especially in the way you cared for him these past 10 years. It's freedom from tyranny, like Soviet Russia or a debilitating stroke. And it hangs in my office, where I'll think about him every day. May his memory always be a blessing, Zichrono Livracha. We'll rise now as we continue with our memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim.
רחמים שוכן במרומים המסי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים ודברים כזרע רקיע מזהירים את נשמת אברהם בן יעקב מרדכי ולאה שלח לעולמו וגן עדן תהיה מנוחתו אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Avram ben Yaakov Mordechai Velea, Alan Riga, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Following this service, internment will be at Mount Olive. And Shiva today will be from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and again this evening from 6 to 8 p.m. with Minyan at 7 p.m. Thursday from 2 to 4 again, and 6 to 8 with Minyan at 7 p.m. And Friday from 2 to 4. And those who wish may give charity donations to Reserve Case Hospice, to NAMI, N-A-M-I, or to B'nai Yeshurun. Thank you all for being here to support the family.